We are live with Rick Chen, Blind Ambition. And today, this is going to be a really interesting one. We're talking about Google. And you know what? I'm just going to hand off to Rick to talk about like what Google did with like a hotel return to office kind of thing, trying to lure people back. So Rick, could you explain like what's going on, how Google is trying to get people to get back to the office?
Yeah, so I mean, this special episode of The Blind Ambition with Jack Kelly, we're taking on Google's $99 a night
Mhm.
hotel. So it's an on-campus hotel in Mountain View at their kind of world headquarters. And it's basically like a corporate hotel. Like think like the Marriott next to like a big fancy company headquarters. Think the hotels that these Accenture, Deloitte consultants usually have to stay in when they're like auditing a company's firm. Same thing at Google. So this is a hotel that's been around for quite some time. And according to the news reports, what ended up happening is, Google's HR sent out a memo to their employees saying, "Oh, the great news, everybody! The on-campus hotel is going to have a $99 a night special through the end of September." And it was widely discussed internally that, oh, if you want to comply with the 3 days a week in office policy, the return to office policy, and you've already moved, or perhaps you're coming from a different office, perhaps this hotel discount is a great way to comply with the rules. Perhaps you can just fly in, do your 3 days, stay at the hotel for the 3 nights, and then fly out and do this fairly regularly. And Jack, as you could imagine, it blew up in Google's faces when people found out about this.
Well, on the surface, it sounds somewhat reasonable, right? We want to get people back into the office, but they don't want to do it heavy handed because people revolt. So they're kind of saying, hey, get this hotel. But I'm not really good at math. But if you pay $99 a day, that's like what, 3,000 plus a month, which is pretty much what you can get as an apartment. So number one, if they're giving you kind of supposedly a good deal, why wouldn't they just cut it in half, right? And do the right thing and make it $50 just to start off with? Like, why like, so you're not really saving any money. Second, let me ask you this, Rick. The cynic in me is that it feels like what they're trying to do is make things so easy and nice for their employees. So not only do they want them to get back into the office, they just don't want them to leave. And when I say leave, they don't want to leave and then go and do a startup that competes against Google. So they want to make their life so wonderful that they're just going to say, you know what, I'm just going to hang out here. Does that
I,
make
I
sense?
mean, it completely makes sense, right? Because I think people forget that the reason why a lot of these fabulous benefits and amenities exist in the tech industry even trickle down to smaller startups doing things like free lunch or like foosball tables is because Google and these internet giants early on figured out that their campuses, their offices, because of cheaper commercial real estate, were in the suburbs of San Francisco, right? They were actually in the heart of Silicon Valley. These are kind of like bedroom communities that had nothing going on for them. So if you wanted to go eat lunch, you had to have a car, you had to drive maybe 15, 20 minutes away. And it was just time wasted, so to speak, right? Where you're driving 20 minutes away, you have your lunch for an hour, you come back 20 minutes, you basically lost almost 2 hours of your day. And so these huge tech companies said, let's keep you on campus, make things a bit easier for you. Let's have a cafeteria and serve you lunch, right? So your butt's going to be in the seat. You're going to be more happy, more productive. And then it started getting a little bit devious, right? Where they said, oh, well, if we offer you breakfast, maybe you'll come into the office sooner. If we offer you dinner, maybe you'll stay later. Then it became shuttles to and from different cities, right? And so now you're saying, oh, I don't have to drive. I'm just going to use the shuttle schedule. And oh, as luck would have it, the shuttle schedule is quite late too, or is quite early too, right? And so there's like these different things that they've kind of tweaked to basically keep your butt in the office. Um, and COVID and working from home kind of threw a wrench in all of these things, right?
It to me, from the outside, it seems so insidious. It's like the modern version of
Mm.
the company town. Do you remember ever seeing these old timey pictures of like these coal mines and these, people digging for gold, and then they go into the corporate store and they have the corporate housing. Same thing, right? Like 100 years later, 200, whatever years later, and we're doing the same thing. We're keeping him in there, and we don't want him to leave.
Like, I mean, I think it's just it's exactly right, right? Where a lot of these cities in the Bay Area, a lot of these huge giants, they're located in just like middle of nowhere suburbs, right? So Google in Mountain
Mhm.
View, um, Netflix is in Los Gatos, which is like this suburb of suburbs in the
So
Bay
wait,
Area.
why do they do that then? Like, do they do it purposefully, or it's just when the time they constructed these buildings was cheaper, so they just went there?
Yeah, I mean, for each company to be specific. So
Yeah,
some of these earlier companies, right? It was because the Silicon Valley was quite literally um, in these suburbs, right? If you think about HP and all those like famous old school tech titans, they were literally started in people's garages,
yeah.
and those garages were exactly in that area. And so, they tend to cluster. Um, I mean, now Mountain View and Menlo Park for Meta and Facebook are a bit more developed, but they're still these small suburb cities. Nothing going around for long around, right? There's just nothing there, and so you need these amenities. Like if you wanted, Meta dry cleaning, there might not have been a dry cleaner, a good one in that town, and so they
Mhm.
had to do it on campus.
That is so wild. So what else are you seeing in terms of, these companies trying to kind of dole out different incentives to get back to the office? What other crazy
Well,
stuff you're seeing?
I think what's really interesting is the approach that some companies are taking. Some are clearly going with the carrot, and others are going with the stick, right? And so
Mhm.
on one end, you have companies that are saying your butt has to be in the seat. We are going to be tracking your badge swipes, and we're going to have a talk with your manager and HR if you're not coming in 3 times a week, 5 times a week, whatever that number might be. And so that's kind of the like come into the office or
Mhm.
you'll lose your job, one extreme. And then the other is, hey, let's remind you of how great the office was, right? What you've missed out since you've been working from home. So Lyft's CEO recently told their employees in an all hands, hey, remember the free snacks and the free lunch? Come on in. We still have those things. You can enjoy these things with your friends, your coworkers. Come back to the office. So there's kind of it's almost like silly the way that David Risher over there at Lyft has made it, but I think most companies are somewhere in between, right? Where they want you to come into the office and they're saying, hey, don't make us force you. Like, this is our philosophy. We think that, people work better in office. You can like level
Mhm.
up. You can, have that creativity, those serendipitous moments. But somehow, one way or another, you need to come into the office. Please don't make us do it. Like, please don't make us make you come in, right?
But let's can I dial this back for a second? Who like why don't why did anybody do pushback on the Lyft CEO who comes out and says, "Hey guys, we're going to get free treats. You're going to get potato chips and you're going to get jelly beans and come back. Like, dude, didn't anybody speak up to that person, say, hey, boss, that doesn't sound good. You're not going to, not only are you not going to attract people coming back, because who in their right mind is going to say, oh, I'm going to come in because I'm going to get free cookies. That's crazy. Like, they would have stopped and say, no, don't do this. This is just so bad.
I'm very opinionated about this as a
Yeah. Okay.
communications professional, right? As someone that like counsels executives
Yeah,
of
you're the PR
what
guy
to
for
say,
Lyft,
what
right?
not to say.
What would you have done? Like the PR guy. Now you're going to lose all PR jobs because you're going to just trash her. But I'm sorry, but like we got to do this for the podcast. So what would you have done if like you were telling the boss there, like, all right, before you announce it, let's here's what you should do.
Yeah, I mean, it's about like taking a step back and like
Yeah.
really kind of gauging where your audience is already
Mhm.
feeling, right? And so a lot of these tech companies, they should know, especially if you just go on blind and do a quick scan of the homepage, that many tech workers are really upset about returning to the office. They want to stay at home, or alternatively, they actually prefer a hybrid
Mhm.
where they get to decide which days they come in. They're not big fans of your butt has to be in the seat Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, or whatever those days might be. And if you boil that down, that underlying sentiment is we want autonomy in the way that we work. And autonomy is one of the easiest things that you can support as an employer, or that you should support as
Mhm.
an employer, right? And so I can imagine that these Lyft comments, they were made off the cuff because the CEO didn't prepare, right? Of the pushback that he was going to get from the return to office. It was likely a question and saying, "Oh, but we don't want to go back to the office.
Mhm.
Will there be an exception policy?" And he likely said this off the cuff, which made employees much more upset. And it leads to today of how we found out about this, right? An employee was upset. And this is like a tale just
Mhm.
classic as time. An employee is upset, leaks it to the media. The media jumps on this, reports
Right,
it
because it's
as
a fun
news.
story.
It's fun. So it's
Yeah.
novel.
Yeah.
It's newsworthy, right?
Yeah.
Um, and you make something so much worse, right? So, my prep for my advice for all these execs is prep. Work with your
Mhm.
internal communications, work with your internal HR people teams to really gauge like, okay, this is my proposed policy. What is the kind of general sentiment of my existing employees already? And how are they going to react to my proposed policy, right? Maybe they might say, yeah, like Blue Origin, Amazon, Jeff Bezos, rocket ship company. It makes sense that you would have to be in the office to build a rocket. And so a lot of those employees, they're not upset about returning
Mhm.
to the office, right? They kind of get it. And so it's for them, it would be much easier, right? Where actually your employees might be saying, "Yeah, I get it. Like, just tell me more. Like,
Mhm.
what days do I need to come in, or can I choose?" And so you can kind of tailor your kind of delivery based on your actual set of circumstances. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of these executives they forget to do that.
Rick, it's so interesting because very seldom, if ever, I've seen a company in which they said, we're making this decision based on surveys and feedback from our people. Think about it. You really don't see that where they're like, okay, we're going to have you come back 3 days a week or 4 days a week or five, or you don't have to come back, but here's what we based it on. We had a micro surveys, we had feedback, we have town halls, so we distilled all this information. Think about it. All these companies aren't doing that. So they're just arbitrarily saying, okay, 3 days in, Monday and Friday are at home. And there's nothing substantiated. Am I missing something? Like, have you seen that there's some data that backs any of this up?
Yeah, Jack, I'm gonna surprise you or maybe
Yeah.
upset you,
Yeah.
but I've personally seen the exact opposite.
Mhm.
So my
Okay.
advice to all the professionals that are listening is take those like Culture Amp, the Glint, those like quote unquote like pulse surveys very
Mhm.
seriously and kind of read between the lines. Get a very cynical about how they're asking the question and in which way. So I've seen companies where they ask something like, um, what is your preference for coming into the office? And it's 0 days, 1 day a week, 2 days, three, four, five. And what HR people will do is they'll kind of interpret it in the way that they want. And so let's say that their executives, the company has decided that they want to do return to office. And what they'll end up doing is when they interpret the results to that survey question, the 0 through 5 days a week, they'll count up all the responses of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and say, oh, 80% or 90% of our employees want to be in the office, right? Because they'll just count everything as not zero, as, oh, well, you've expressed some interest in being in the office at least part of the time, at least 1 day a week. And so they'll use those figures and say, oh, actually, we're responding to your feedback and we're saying, oh, well, like 90% of you have expressed interest in the office at least once a week. So we're gonna give you that and say, hey, this is our new return to office policy. Uh, just for the sake of collaboration, we're going to set, you know, easy collaboration days where everyone has to be in the office 3 days a week, even though that might not be what a majority of folks selected in that survey.
But wait. Let's, because I think most of the audience now is dumbfounded like I am. So what you're saying, if I understand it correctly, the way they do put out these surveys,
They do.
and you have to be careful how you answer it. But even at how you answer it, they're going to come back and massage it to the way they want to have the results. So if the CEO and the C-suite want you back in, they're going to massage the numbers to say, oh yeah, hey boss, yeah, they want to come back, but they don't actually give the exact figures. That is horrible. That is cold.
Yeah. Or they do give you the exact figures and they
Yeah.
kind of like misinterpret it, right? So when a question, they'll take the inverse, right? So that's what they're doing. They're asking you, how many days do you want to be in the office?
Mhm.
And they're just taking the inverse, right? Because you would expect if a lot of people are not saying 5 or 4, that means a majority of people don't want to spend the majority of their time in the office, right? They're favoring hybrid or remote work, which is how the kind of employees are interpreting that question
Mhm.
and filling it out. And then a more cynical, more diabolical, if you will, interpretation is, oh, well, anyone that says one or more is expressing interest in working in an office, right? And so they're just
That's
using the
crazy.
inverse.
That's so nuts.
It's just something like what's another classic example where I've seen this? Um, are you satisfied with the leadership team? And anyone that answers something that's not very unsatisfied or unsatisfied. So they're counting the neutral, they're counting the meh, barely satisfied, they're counting the, very satisfied as saying like, oh,
Hmm.
look at our guy. He has an approval rating of 70, 80%. Right. And so they're just like narrowing down which responses that they actually want to, you know, use to kind of bolster their point or carry out their agenda. I mean, it's a trick that I use all the time as a PR person, right? Like all these statistics, you just have to figure out like, oh, well, what's the story that I want to tell?
That's so crazy. So, this fosters the belief. You have a lot of people who say, hey, HR is not your friend. HR is the enemy. HR is working for the company. As a recruiter, I never really felt that way or the other. But you hear, over the years, I hear so many people saying that, no, don't trust them. Be careful. And this is like a flagrant example of maybe their currying favor with their CEO, C-suite, because they probably know they would prefer someone back in the office. So let's massage those results to cater to what the executives want and not what the workers really want, which is terrible. That's really,
Yeah.
dude, I'm shocked. I'm really surprised. I don't mean to be naive, but that's, that's really cold blooded to say, to manipulate like what, all right, we're going to say, hey, we want to hear your voice. And then it's almost like, okay, you get there, the answers, you crumple it up and just throw it out. And go, okay, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. We're going to do what we're going to do anyway.
Yeah, or you're just reading
Ooh,
it to see if you can prove your own point, right? So
yeah.
I feel bad for HR because I think no one truly wakes up every day and says, "Hey, how am I going to like screw someone over?"
Yeah, I'm
Right?
gonna
Like,
be mean to everybody,
right? Like
right?
I don't do that. You
Yeah,
don't do that. Most people don't
right,
do that. HR certainly doesn't do
yeah,
that. I think they're just in a tough spot where their executives want to do something. They, in their, being genuine and wanting to do the right thing, decides to do a survey. And what ends up happening is a lot of people, they're jaded and they think, well, the company's not going to listen to me anyway. Why am I just going to fill out the survey
right,
or
what
why am I going
difference
to
does
take
it
the
make?
time?
And they may know that I'm saying I just want to do 1 day a week, and they're gonna think I'm a slacker, and maybe next thing you know, I'm gonna be on a PIP, and I'm gonna be
Right.
kind of, nudged out of the place. So then you gotta wonder, like, all right, maybe I know they want the answer of 4 days a week, so I'll put that down there. So if they know, they find out that it's me, they're gonna think, "Oh, Jack wants to be in the office 4 days a week. Good, he's a hard worker."
Exactly. And then it ends up happening is like people are like kind of like thinking what is socially
Yeah,
acceptable or what will paint them in the
yeah,
best light. Those they like they fudge the numbers themselves as they're participating in the survey. Or alternatively, there are people that just give up and think, well, I'm pretty sure I see the writing on the wall. The company wants us to return to the
right,
office. Our competitor is doing something. Someone else in the
yeah.
industry is doing it. Google is doing it. And so they just don't fill out the survey at all. And so you get a lot of the people that are actually like antagonistic towards the proposal, kind of self-selecting them out.
Mhm.
And so you actually lose that voice of opposition. And all the people that are filling out the survey are the people that like it. And then,
This
then you
is
you end
this
up
is
getting
amazing
the
insider
policy you don't like.
information. I love this. This is amazing insider information for people to know, because I think one of the great things about what we're doing is like we're pulling back the curtain for what really goes on, where workers are like, "What? Why? How are these decisions made? Why? What?" And this is a perfect example of walking through. This is what goes on in the kitchen. This is what goes on, in the factory behind the scenes that you don't really want to know, but this is what's happening.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've had to do the mental gymnastics as part of those teams, right? To kind
Yeah.
of justify or even interpret it cynically or
Right.
narrowly certain results. I've had
Right.
things, this is not related to return to the office, but I've
Yeah.
had survey questions that go out and say like, which of these benefits do you like the most?
Mhm.
And what they'll do is the benefit that is chosen the least amount of times, or the kind of loser in that option gets cut. Right. And so it's like a never like it's a not winning proposal, right? Like one of these things is gonna get cut,
Wow.
and it's up to you to decide. And that's a terrible, terrible experience, right? Because no one knows that going in, right? Because then you're gonna select all of them. Like, don't cut any of my
Yeah.
benefits. Um, so it's very kind of tricky.
Right.
So I recommend when you get one of these like kind of company proposals, or even someone kind of just an exec at an all hands just throws it out there informally off the cuff, to really think in between the lines of like, okay, like if I respond this, almost get a little strategic with it.
Yeah.
If I respond this, how could someone with like, you know, not the best intentions kind of interpret this, right?
How sad
Or
is that? That's what we have to do now.
yeah, there's a little like gamesmanship on both
Yeah.
sides, right? Because I think executives for a long time, they've always understood that, um, in a lot of these employee poll surveys, there's often a question of something to the effect of, um, I feel that I am compensated fairly for my role and experience. There's almost always that type of question. And executives and HR people have known for a long time that there's kind of this like handshake, like unspoken agreement among all the employees to say no, disagree, right? No matter what, even if you're at Google and you're
Mhm.
making $500,000, it is kind of your duty to the rest of your, coworkers to say, no, strongly disagree, right? In the hopes that the company will just say, oh, well, everyone disagrees. And, our compensation philosophy, our total rewards policy is to be top of the band or 90th
Mhm.
percentile or whatever it might be. We have to increase it a little bit. Um, Now companies are doing the exact same thing on their end to favor them, right? So it kind of goes back and forth. And I think we're seeing that in the job market, right? Where in the 2020s, the 2021, the pendulum really swung over to the employee side. We had the great resignation. We had people that worked kind of like nonsense jobs and were cashing out.
Mhm.
And now things are getting a little tighter, and employers are finding different ways to kind of exert their control again, right? So it's these hiring freezes, it's these longer interview process because they want to see, oh, well, let's see if we can find that unicorn or let's play the field.
Well, how
And
is
there's
it?
all these little tricks.
Well, how tough is it? So let's say with the blind platform that's predominantly, tech oriented, you have other sectors too, but predominantly tech.
Right.
Are you seeing it harder for them to find new jobs? Are they do they have to go take less money? What's how long do the interviews take? What are you seeing?
Yeah, so the interview process is taking a lot longer, and so we're seeing recruiters ghost candidates. That's starting to come back a little bit. Um, there's also kind
Now,
of
why are they when you say recruiters are ghosting, are these like internal talent acquisition recruiters or just recruiters in general?
no, these are the in-house
Okay.
recruiters, in firm, so to speak.
So in other words,
And
they're
so
just cutting people off when they ghost. They're just like, I'm not going to even bother with Rick or Jack anymore. It's you're just not going to get hired, and I don't want to tell them why. So ghosting.
no,
Okay.
it's more of the I've interviewed Rick
Hmm.
and he could do the job. He's
Right.
okay. But I also know that there's a lot of other marketers and PR people that got laid off. So maybe there's someone even better than
Yeah.
Rick. I don't want to just say yes to Rick because he's like kind of good enough. Maybe
Right.
there's someone that's excellent because what we're also seeing across the industry is just a lot of more senior folks kind of getting desperate and applying to kind of the like middle level role rather than strictly kind of senior roles.
On
And
your
so
on
there's
your on your platform, let me do it just like on your
no, please.
platform that has you offer these services. Do you find that they will accept somebody who is older, more experienced for a junior role, or they get a little nervous, like what's up with this person? Why do they want to take less money and a lower title? What are you noticing?
Yeah, we're seeing companies very eager to accept people that, they're senior and maybe they're getting leveled down to kind of the middle tier. They're still experienced, quote unquote, an experienced
Mhm.
professional, not entry level or not a new grad. But like some of these companies, their salary bands, their job level pathways are so broad. And that middle tier can be three, four, five, six
Mhm.
different levels internally. And so for the company's perspective, it's like, oh well, it's nearly all the same, right? But if I can get Rick at a lead instead of a director, I might save, 20, 30, 40K, right? And he'll still be happy because it's still, a senior enough title, or his, quote unquote scope will still be quite broad.
Outside tech, I see it differently, where and I don't want to say it's ageism per se, but what happens is that you have somebody who's earning a certain amount of money and working a certain amount of years, the two coincide. You're working at, Morgan Stanley, Bank of America, what have you, for 15, 20 years, and I'm making up a number, 300,000, whatever. And then they're in between roles and they'll say, hey, I'll take two. Instead of welcoming them, say, oh my gosh, we're going to get a bargain because this person is good and smart and wonderful, they'll pass them up because they'll feel like something's wrong. Why would they want to go and take considerably less money, lower title? And to what you alluded to earlier, they'll just say, you know what? Let's put that person on the side and we'll keep looking and keep looking and keep looking.
Yeah, I think it is a little different in tech because, to my understanding, in finance, there's a bit of title inflation, right? Like
Mhm.
nearly everyone's a vice president or something
They
of
hand
that
it out like
effect,
candy. It's
right?
hilarious. It's hilarious. Like vice president, and like and it's meaningless. So like everybody, you could boast and say, "Oh, well, I'm a vice president." Yeah, so is everybody, pretty much.
Right. And so alternatively, in tech, a lot of these big tech firms like Amazon, Google, Meta, they're known for down leveling people, right? So I'm a senior director at a startup in PR, but I think at a Meta or a Google, I would just probably be something like a lead, which is like one step below a director, right? So it's actually two rungs down on the quote unquote like job ladder for me. And they require the same amount of experience, 10 plus years and that kind of thing. On the engineering side, we see it a lot more in terms of like the leveling because some of these levels, the jumps between levels, the equity compensation can be like extraordinary.
Mhm.
And so they're a bit incentivized to say, oh, well, come in at the L4 level, the middle tier engineer, and we have performance reviews every 6 months. And so in one or two reviews, we'll get you back to that L5 level that you want. Right. And so it gets people trapped into kind of making these horizontal
Yeah.
lateral moves. Um, and then they're getting, obviously a higher compensation typically, but not in terms of kind of it could be, right? Or in the traditional sense.
But is it possible if someone kind of levels down, but they really work hard, you could kind of bounce right back up? And then also, could it be, hey, I'll go to, whatever kind of tech company thinking that it's doing really well and I'm taking less compensation, but I'm still getting stock. I'm going to benefit from the stock. So you know what? I'll put my ego aside
Right.
and be able to maybe benefit more with the appreciation of the value of, the RSUs and whatever stock you have or can get.
I mean, it's happened to me where I've willingly accepted the down level to
Mhm.
like my first drop into tech was exactly that, and I was given that promise. And I've done it some other times in my career as well to kind of like make a bet on a startup and kind of make up that level later or make up that comp later. But my advice is, I've been lucky. Um, the thing is, your recruiter doesn't make the promotion decisions, right?
Yeah.
When your butt is in the seat or after you sign their offer letter, they're moving on to the next candidate, the next role that they have to work on, and they almost forget about you.
Mhm.
Um, it's the hiring manager that often makes these decisions. Or in some of these larger companies, they actually have a compensation committee or they have a promotion committee. It's like usually a group of like very senior hiring managers, maybe a head of the department or a VP or another executive of that department that makes the decision and quite literally votes on your kind of promotion packet. Your kind of proof that you submit in on your review process, the work that your manager is putting in to kind of advocate and say, yes, um, Jack has deserved this promotion because he's been performing at the next level for XYZ. He's done, he's made an impact on ABC project. Um, that isn't the recruiter, that is in HR, right? That's already in someone else's department. So I'd be very careful if your recruiter is really like saying that and pushing hard because they just want you to sign, right? They're
Mhm.
you have to like look at their incentives. Their incentives are just to close the role, get your butt in the seat and make that placement. And they'll be willing to say almost anything to get you to do so, right? They'll say like, "Oh yeah, the hiring manager will take care of you." They'll
That's a
remember.
big Yeah, that's a big challenge. It's a big problem because what happens, it's not a regulated entity like, Wall Street or pharmaceuticals. So, you can kind of, push the envelope. You could, hey, Rick, trust me on this. I know they're not going to put it in in the offer letter, but trust me, they love you. If you do well, you're going to get a huge bonus. Here's what they're going to give you. Oh, Jack, is the bonus in writing? No, no, it's not in writing, but trust me, they're going to do it. They're going to
Oh,
put
this is
this
how we
huge
always
bonus.
do things.
Yeah, don't worry about it. It's all good. I can't tell you how many times people come to me because of that, because they're irate that they go through, they get their bonus, and they're like, what? And then they'll call me. I want a new job. I think they just ripped me off. They lied to me. They said I was going to get such and such bonus. I was going to get my review and get a promotion. Nothing. So that's something to be really careful about. I would get when you get for people, watching this now, watching it later, get it in writing. Don't trust when they say, big bonus, lots of stock, whatever. You want to have that on your offer letter because, as Rich was kind of saying, a month goes by, 2 months, 6 months, they forget because they're on to, like you said, on to the next one, on to the next one, and they forget about you and what you said, and like, I don't remember that. And to be fair, they probably don't remember it. So get it in writing for sure.
I mean, or alternatively, kind of back to this like reading between the lines
Mhm.
theme, often in tech companies, you'll have lunch with someone on the team, or you're going to have someone in your interview lineup that stands out that, you might be an engineer, but you're meeting with someone that's not a product person. That might be like a data person or analyst. It's usually like the culture interview where they're trying to gauge fit. I've been in interviews where I'm meeting with an engineer, and the engineer is like, "Why the hell am I meeting with the PR guy?" And those are that odd person out or that like lunch, the person that has lunch with you at the
Mhm.
interview day. Those are often the best people that you can reach out to informally and say, "Hey, I've been told this. What is your bonus policy like?" Or can you share with me what the promotion policy is like? Because I've been at certain companies where the first cycle, your first 6 months, you're actually not eligible for promotion at all because you're too new. Or sometimes you don't even have to go through the actual review process because they say, oh, well, there's not enough data about you. You're still ramping up. Your main job is to like learn. And so when the recruiter says, "Oh, the first cycle, the first um, review you get, we'll just give you that promotion." And in some cases, it's technically impossible, right? Where you're either not going through the process or you're not eligible for your first promotion until 12 months, 18 months in. And so
Yeah. It's a good thing you
it,
brought it up
it, it
because
can be
these are the
tricky.
things. Yeah, these are things that people aren't really focusing on. And and to go back to what you were saying about the different interviews where, hey, why am I interviewing? You're the PR guy. I don't get it. It doesn't make sense.
Right.
This is what I'm seeing in the market right now. It's decision by consensus. So rather than, Rick, you're going through the interview process, you meet an HR person, you meet your hiring manager, maybe another person or two, and that used to be it. Now, no exaggeration, 3, 6, 9, 10 people over, up to 6 months or so, because I think people are afraid to make the decision and say, okay, I want to hire Rick. So they rely on having everyone agree. And it's so hard to have everyone agree. It's impossible, because some people don't even know and don't care. So it's easy for them to say, nah, I don't like Rick. And that person has like nothing related to what you're going to do for a job. They just brought him into the mix. And he or she is just going to be, no, and it's scuttled. All that time wasted. Crazy.
I mean, alternatively, I've seen this as a problem for huge delays, specifically in tech. There's some executives that insist on personally signing off on each offer
Mhm.
that the company gives. And so I've seen startups where even the CEO or a founder is making a decision for like a sales role,
Mhm.
right? Because they want to personally vet. So they want to like see all of those like interview feedback. And they're actually making the final decision. And some of these executives, they have busy schedules, they have busy calendars, or they have no idea because they
No
weren't,
idea. They're
a
too
functional
removed,
expert.
right?
They exactly, they're too removed. And so it takes time. And so I've seen that cause delays where they're saying like, oh, well, the committee that makes offers, they don't meet until 2 weeks from now, or
Yeah.
something similar like that, or like, oh, well, the CTO has to sign off on all offers. for engineers above this level, and he hasn't reviewed your feedback packet yet. There's a lot of these kind of like BS things that
It's
happen.
so torture. If you just look on Twitter and other social media sites, that's the bane of people's existence. Like, oh yeah, we're gonna let you know by Friday. We're gonna give you the offer Friday, and then you invariably you see a
Monday
meme like it's
comes.
Friday, nothing happens. Monday, oh yeah, they're still looking at it, deliberating it.
Mm.
It's torturous, and because the system is just not. It's not. You would think it would be so streamlined, right, and so tight, but it's really not. So if you're waiting for that CEO or some executive to sign off on people he never met with or she never met with, it's just so easy to just wait, because like it's no skin off her or his back because they're not reporting. If they're reporting directly to the person, they care because they want somebody in
Right.
the seat to help out. If
I
it's
need the
three,
help
four
now.
steps, yeah, removed, it doesn't hurt me firsthand. So there's more risk to saying yes to hire than not to hire because they're not real. There's no connection. So if they say no, yeah. And if they say yes and it doesn't work, they're going to blow up their political capital because everyone's going to go, why did you hire Jack? He sucks. He's an idiot. Why'd you do that? Right. So the incentives are kind of not, they're not right.
Right. And I think it's just, I mean, to summarize, it just always look at someone's incentive, right?
Mhm.
So it often
Yeah.
explains their behavior, right? So like HR, their incentive is to keep their leadership, their bosses happy, right? And so they have to make these like mental gymnastics
Mhm.
and take the cues from someone else and kind of enforce and play that policy. Recruiters, they want your butt in the seat. They want the offer letter signed so that they can move on to their next role, and do that. Hiring managers, they want you because there's actually a work need, a business need for you, right? Like we need PR, or our production is too slow, so we need another handful of engineers, right? They're the most motivated. So you can kind of see that play out time and time again.
That's brilliant. It's so interesting. It's right. It's like follow the incentives and you're going to know what's really going on. That's what it is. How are people getting paid? How are like what's the counterparty and what's in it for them? And then you really know what the deal is. And then you can figure it out and say, oh, I get it now. I get it now. Hey, on a I'll say lighter note, but maybe not to circle back. This is kind of meta, no pun intended. What's going on with Zoom telling everybody to go back to an office? That seems weird,
Now,
doesn't it? Is that weird or is that like
I
how do you
mean,
process that?
I think basically what happened is this past week at an all hands, the CEO of Zoom, Eric Yuan, told um, his employees that they would be returning to the office. They're previously remote or hybrid. And apparently, the story was the CEO was inspired by seeing an intern in the office late at night till 9 or 10 p.m. And he said, wow, I love that grit. I love that dedication, and I'd love to see more of it. And apparently, this was the story that he told at all hands in front of all the employees. And so people on Blind, their reactions, I'm sure you can imagine, Jack, were
Yeah.
quite vivid. Um, the analogy that I liked was this would be like if Tesla required you to commute to the office in a traditional, internal combustion car.
Right.
It just doesn't make sense. Why would you do this, right? Like we're known for making it easier to work remotely. Uh, but no, we want people, to come into the office and have these like face-to-face meetings and to not use Zoom. Um, and I think it goes back to kind of like, the mental gymnastics,
Mhm.
right? Like, I'm sure the CEO or the executives had wanted a return to office much sooner. We're in 2023. I think Jack, we've been following return to office, all these like false starts all the
Mhm.
way back till 2021. So there's 2 years now. Um, are they gonna do it? Will they do it? Oh, they've announced this, but they're going back. We've seen it all, and so my suspicion is They wanted to do this for a long time, Zoom did. And again, these off the cuff remarks of, oh, well, like I saw this intern and like it made me see like the value of like being in the office. And again, employees leak when they're dissatisfied, right? Or they're upset. And that's what happens, right? This comes out in the world and it kind of makes all the headlines.
You got to love it where, the CEOs and execs pride themselves. Oh, we're looking at the numbers. We're looking at the data. And the data is some kid intern who just stayed late once. And then they're going to fashion the whole return to office because that one intern who probably was just late because he was probably watching porn on his on his computer and didn't want to go home. And they're basing a whole decision on that kid.
This
How crazy.
anecdata, right?
That's so. Hey, by the way, as a side note, can we take a humble brag that we had on the guy, the VC who wrote the first check,
Right.
$250,000 to Zoom to get it started? How cool is that?
Yep. TSVC was the VC firm, right?
You remember that, right? That's
I
so
do
wild.
indeed.
Yes. So we caused all this problem.
Maybe. Yeah. You're welcome. But I think what's really interesting is you're just going to see all of these companies really try to navigate to. I think they're not necessarily going back to return to office for the sake of the so-called like better collaboration or the like serendipitous moments of like walking past each other and having that great conversation in the hallway or by the water cooler or in the snack canteen. It's more about what return to office represents for a lot of these executives, right? And I think return to office for a lot of these employers, these executives, these HR people really represents returning back to quote unquote normal, right? That means like before COVID, before remote work, trying to bring that normalcy because right now what they're seeing is um things are just so turbulent, right? We have these like political disagreements, we have these like crazy things that are happening in terms of the economy. It's so unpredictable. Will we have a recession? Will we not have a recession? And a lot of these executives are just looking at things that they can control, right? And the things that they can control as leaders, as executives, is what goes on when they're four walls. And so they want to see, hey, I can have people come back to the office, and that kind of seems like what it was like before. And maybe we'll get to that magic or that like motive style of work that, I liked previously back again. And so you look out for like these little things
Yeah.
of all of these things that were kind of implemented in the last 2, 3 years, kind of special during COVID. I think you're going to find that a lot of these employers are going to say, oh, those were just one offs. Right. So we saw it with Meta, uh, making the performance reviews harder or stricter, right? Because during the pandemic, they wanted to give everyone a break. So they're kind of undoing that. You're seeing return to office, they're undoing that remote work. You're seeing companies that are, saying, hey, like come back. We have all these free snacks. Didn't you miss these free snacks when you were not working? Right. So it's kind of these like little like undoing mechanisms that they just want to find some normalcy. And I'm not sure if this is kind of the right approach because employees certainly don't see it that way.
Well, how about this? Before we wind up, can we make a prediction?
Yes,
Okay.
always.
My prediction is this: if the economy, the job market is doing okay to not doing well, and let's say the market takes a correction, we're going to see maybe 4 days a week in the office as a compromise and Fridays off. If for any chance things just go parabolic in a positive way, and AI is a game changer. And what now they're talking about like the quantum computers that they're talking about now and all that. And let's say that works and boom, everything is great. Then I could see the opposite where the workers could say, wait a minute, we could pick and choose whatever job we want. And now all of a sudden it'll be maybe 2 days in the office or maybe even remote. So I think it really depends. Bad economy means they get pushed to get back in the office. Everything is fantastic, roaring, then the job seekers, the employees, they have the upper hand, and then they could call the shots, which they want remote. What's your take? What's your bet?
I'm just a bit more cynical. My
Mhm,
take is no matter what, you're going to see these employers take steps to kind of reduce these like so-called liberties and
mhm.
uh, the so-called entitlement that a lot of workers have now that they seem to have the power.
Right.
So expect to see like reduced or cut gym reimbursements, home internet, home office stipends. Those will probably be gone. Um, in office lunch, that's like a 50-50. I think some of them will cut them just to kind
Wow,
of
like, you're doing
save
everything to
money.
get people to hate you. What's going on here?
No,
Oh,
I truly think
yeah.
that that is what's going to happen,
You think
right?
so?
Where
Yeah.
they're going to say, "Hey, let's just get back to normal. All
Enough
of
is
these
enough,
nice to
right? Kind of
haves,
thing.
we have the power now. We were
Yeah.
like desperate to hire, but now we've realized like, oh, we actually don't need that much, or we can
Yeah.
wait a little bit longer." Unfortunately, I think that's where it's going to head out.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you. It seems like between the white collar and blue collar workers, it seems the blue collar workers frontline are doing really well. Like if you look at the
Yeah,
labor statistics, those are the ones who are scoffing up all the jobs. And unfortunately, a lot of them are taking 2 or 3 jobs, not because they want to, but they have to. And when
yeah.
it comes to the white collar, not so much, not so much at all. Very slow, very sluggish. It's like a white collar recession. It's not easy. So I can
No,
see, I see your point, like, where they say, hey, we now have the power, like you said, the employees, and they could call the shots.
yeah, I've heard some executives out there, they're calling it as this is the perfect time to quote unquote make upgrades,
Mhm.
right? And so they're saying, hey, if we're interviewing and this person isn't like a surefire bullseye hit, let's wait because there's
Yes,
probably someone out there with all these layoffs.
it's
Or
exactly the mindset.
alternatively,
Yep.
I've seen some companies where they're saying, like, oh, Rick isn't doing that well, maybe now's the time where we can get rid of him. And there's probably someone out there that could be even better. Let's quote unquote make an upgrade in that role. So I mean, that's the kind of the like little nefarious swing in the labor market where it's back to the power seems to be back to the employer, and they're
How
trying to make up for lost ground
how about one
with a
last thing?
vengeance.
How about this one last wild card? Do you think you'll have companies that maybe are underneath, let's say the tech sector, not the FANG, but like a level or two under, to stand out, that they'll say, hey, we're going to go full remote, no strings attached. That's it, just to be able to attract, the top talent. So in other words, you'll have some companies that are purposefully going to say, we're going remote to be competitive, figuring they could get all the really great people who want remote. They'll be happy, they'll be motivated. And so then, you have a choice.
Yeah, I'm seeing that more in the tech sector at
Yeah.
the extreme.
Mhm.
So it's not the one level down, these like so-called unicorns that are pre-IPO. It's startups that you've never heard of that
So
are
really
really
coming going that they really need to get noticed, and they're desperate to get people. So yeah, okay.
this is their one way to
Yeah.
like really stand out with their kind of quote unquote like blockbuster benefit, right? Where they'll say, well, we'll outfit your home office. We'll pay for your internet. We'll let you work remotely forever and ever. It's more on kind of the like like 2 3 rungs down,
Mhm.
or the startups that you haven't really necessarily heard of. Those are the folks that are going to be more eager because it doesn't cost them much, and they can't offer in terms of the stock or the cash compensation, and so they're going to try to make it up with these kind of secondary benefits.
Well, this is awesome, Rick, dude. Basically took the curtain, right? You opened it up and gave all these insights. And this is awesome. So people could really sense this is what's going on. This is what's happening. So people who are like looking for a job and can't find it and they think it's their fault. Now they're like, no, all right, I see the bigger picture.
Yeah, I mean, if I were to like leave the audience with anything, it's like read in between the lines and look at what that question might be
Yeah.
really asking you, or how could someone really misinterpret this to serve them? Because you have to look at the incentives, right? And what people are incentivized by.
Awesome. Great advice. This is, it's funny. We started with just Google, $99 hotel, and
Hotel
we
rooms.
and we come, and you know what, just so you know, here, we'll give another little insight to like our podcast. And we're like, oh, well, we just talk like 20 minutes, half hour, just talk about this one topic. That one's like 3 hours later. we touched on like everything. So I hope this offers a lot of value to people. And thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching, everybody.
Thanks. Take care, everyone.